you've got your Bibles with you, I'm going to give you an easy one, actually. All you need to do is open them up or switch them on and just turn to the very first book, Genesis, actually. And we're going to be actually quite near the beginning of Genesis as well, so that makes it even easier. Let's have a look. Yeah, if you want to turn to Genesis chapter 5, that will help you. So we use this language a lot, don't we, of walking with the Lord. It's interesting how it's kind of come into our faith language all the time. We tend to think of Jesus as having a kind of a walking ministry, really. He walked from place to place and people walked with him. And as he walked, they talked together. And as they did this walking and talking and doing life together, they were kind of walking with God, walking with Jesus. And we've taken that image, that picture, and brought it into our everyday life. Because we walk with Jesus, don't we? Don't we? I hope we do. Yeah, we can't. It's kind of, and it's a phrase that we use to describe a relationship with him, and we kind of know what it means. But there's a verse about walking with God. It caught my attention when I first started reading the Bible, actually, way back when. This verse caught my attention. It's one of those that I come back to every now and again and just ponder it. And so it's hopefully going to pop up on the screen, and I'll read it to you. It's from Genesis chapter 5, and it's verse 21. And if you do have it in front of you, it may or may not come up on the screen, we'll see. But and it goes like this. It says, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. And then he was no more because God took him away. And this idea of walking with God is right there, and right back in time, in the beginning of the Bible, in these early chapters. Enoch walked faithfully with God. And that's quite an awesome statement, actually, isn't it? Enoch walked faithfully with God. We could ponder that forever and what that meant. And it's repeated. It's said twice in those 2 or 3 verses, which kind of is there to reinforce it and make that point to us. That's what the writer is doing. And then it says, then he was no more because God took him away. What happened there, I wonder? How was he taken away? Clearly, there's something unusual, maybe even exceptional about this relationship. I don't know, but there's something going on there. And I keep coming back to these verses and looking at them and pondering them and reading different commentators on them to see what they have to say. When we read the early chapters of Genesis, we get caught up with the account of Adam and Eve and their fall, if you like, we call it, when they disobeyed, when they ate from the tree that God said, look, you can have all of this, you can do whatever, look after all of this, just don't go there. And of course, as children do, that's exactly where they went and all the rest of it and so on. But we get caught up with Adam and Eve's fall and all the hope and the promise, all the potential that was there kind of fades away as we read about their poor choices, this poor decision that they made. And then the chapters carry on. It's followed by their eldest son, Cain, murdering his brother Abel, which in turn is followed by another guy called Lamech and his pride in killing another man. And the story seems to go downhill really, really quickly in chapters 3 and 4 of Genesis. There's disobedience. There's the fallout of disobedience. And it all seems to grip humanity harmony becomes disharmony in relationships, in things like marriage and work and family and community. It all seems to start disintegrating, and it's a sad picture. And that's only 3 or 4 chapters in, and we can get caught up with that. But, and there's a but, there is a but. The writer of Genesis then seems to take a breath. He just seems to take a breath, rewind, and then he goes back to the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 5. And he takes a slightly different tack. He's talked about what happened on that particular train of thought, and now he comes back to Adam and Eve, and he takes a new tack, and he follows the line of a new son. Adam and Eve have another son, Seth. And the family tree in chapter 5 of Genesis then reads like this. And if you listen carefully, there's an interesting pattern. If you've got the verses in front of you, you'll be able to read them through on your device or in the Bible that's there in the chair in front of you. But it says that, verse 3, Adam lived, had a son, then he died. Verse 6, Seth lived, had a son, then he died. Verse 9, Enosh lived, had a son, then he died. Kenan lived, had a son, then he died. You get the pattern? Verse 15, Mahalalel lived, had a son, and then he died. Jared lived, had a son, and then he died. No murders, no gloom, no doing bad things going on. Instead, there's a bit of a pattern, a rhythm, and then it says this: Enoch lived, had a son, walked faithfully with God. And then he was no more, because God took him away. Suddenly, in this new line from Adam through this new son, Seth, hope has come back into the relationship between human beings and God. It is still possible to walk with God. 2 thoughts that kind of come out of that for me. First one, Enoch walked with God. And the word that is translated walked means walking about. Walking about. It's not the walking from here to there. It's not that Enoch walked with God and traveled from one place to another. It's Enoch walked about with God. The inference being, did life with God. Wherever, whatever, walking about with God. And it's the same word that's used in Genesis chapter 3 when it says that God walked about in the garden with Adam and Eve. And the emphasis is on walking with, not the destination. It's walking with God. It's about the relationship, the connection. Walk your walk, but walk it with God. And there's suggestions here of friendship, closeness, intimacy, almost as though Enoch has rediscovered something of that relationship that Adam had. He walked faithfully, discovered relationship with his Lord. Now, just to be clear, this does not undo all of those consequences of Adam and Eve and their disobedience and all that stuff, but it is a real encouragement. And the writers put it here to encourage us with this picture of hope, especially compared with what's just gone on in the 2 previous chapters. And this same language of walking with God will later be used of people like Noah and Abraham and Isaac and others. Relationship, walking with God. And then just the second thought, and this is one, if you've got any insights on this one, I'd be ever so grateful if you shared them with me. But God took Enoch away. He's got this connection, this closeness, and then we're told God took him away. In contrast to all those other names that we read in that genealogy and that family tree, Enoch's life seems to end differently. In fact, there is no mention of death for him. He just disappears. God took him. Not like the whirlwind disappearance of Elijah in a chariot of fire that you can read about later on in 2 Kings chapter 2. But there's something mysterious about both of the way these two guys, Enoch and Elijah, are taken. Both of these takings, there's something special about them. What was it about their relationship with God? Does that not interest you? It kind of interests me. I find it very curious, actually. Walking with God that closely. Fantastic. Maybe there was a link between the walking and the taking, the relationship. Don't know. Enoch walked about faithfully with God, did life faithfully with God. And I guess the question is, what about you? What about me? Question is simple. How's your walk? How's your walk? How's your walk with the Lord today? Are you walking about with him? Do you take him with you wherever you're going, whatever you're doing? Back to the washing machine, to the shops, to work, down to the allotment, down into your shed with your mates, whatever you do. You take him with you. Or do you leave him on Sundays at church? How's your walk with the Lord? David's going to come and bring us a little reading from another Old Testament writer. This one's Micah. And David's going to pop up to the front and just read from Micah 6, verse 6, and read a few verses for us. Thank you, David.
It's Micah chapter 6, starting from verse 6 and reading through to verse 8. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 of rivers of oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgressions, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God.
Thank you, David. What does the Lord require of you, of us? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. Walking with the Lord. People promise all sorts of things if only he will get them out of the tight spot that they're in. If you do this, Lord, I'll do that. Trading with God, when what God actually wants is hearts, our love, our devotion, our obedience. He wants us to walk about with him, take him with us all day, every day into what we do. It's an invitation that Enoch understood. And there is remarkable blessing in getting to know God better. There really is, simply giving time to him and letting him in. Let's just be still for a moment. Give you a bit of time to just talk to the Lord quietly in the stillness of your hearts. Just talk to him about your walk with him at the moment. Maybe in the stillness you'll hear him say something to you. Maybe you just quietly want to say something to him. How's your walk with the Lord? Let's be still.